Creality recently came out with the new Halot Ray. This is a 6K desktop resin 3D printer. It has high light evenness, automatic model repair, and lots of other different functions, among some super nice improvements on the machine and also the quality of the prints that come out of the machine. The printing volume is pretty nice and large and should be more than sufficient for your home style printing. Along with that, there's a lot of nice specifications and integrations in the machine, and if you're interested in one of these or any of the other Creality products, feel free to check out the links in the description that will take you to Creality's website. Now, since I'm not really the type of guy that does reviews on these printers, I'd much rather just actually build something. As you guys know, I do love my cars, but I also really like motorcycles. I've never built a motorcycle before, and also never done it on the channel as I've never built one before. That kind of makes sense. A while ago I stumbled upon a creator of 3D files specifically for modeling, Micromachines. He has these files for sale on Cults 3D. I will be leaving links in the description. And he also made a super cool concept motorcycle. I believe this is a 1:12 scale kit that I will be fully printing, painting, and building in this video. If you want to check his designs out, Micromachines STL on Cults 3D. He has done some cars as well that look incredibly cool, and I'm kind of tempted to print and build those in the future as well, so let me know if you're interested in that. With the files for the kit now purchased, I loaded them into Chitubox, added all of the supports, exported it as an STL, and imported it into HaloBox. Now you could also import them directly into HaloBox, that is the software from Creality, add your supports and slice it there, but I'm not really a big fan of the HaloBox software as far as adding supports, etc. So I'd much rather just do that in Chitubox, export the STL, import it into HaloBox, and then export it as the correct file size for the printers that way. As far as print settings go, I kept it pretty standard to what Creality advises. The only things that I changed is the layer height. It is standard at 0.05, and I changed that to a much finer 0.01, so you don't really see the layer lines and the prints come out a lot nicer and smoother. It does take 5 or 6 times as long, but then again, in the end, there's a lot less sanding and the parts just look a lot cleaner. Now you could say that the printer wears out a lot faster as it has to do more work, and that is probably true, but I simply just like the smoother prints, and that is a personal preference for me. You could do pretty much whatever you want. Now, after taking it out of the printer, I moved it into an isopropyl alcohol bath to clean off most of the resin first, and then gave it a proper wash in the wash and clean station from Creality. Once all of the washing and cleaning had been done, I took them out, let it dry so all the excessive alcohol just evaporates, then heated it up with a hairdryer at the highest heat setting to make the prints a bit softer and break off the supports a lot easier. After removing all of the parts from the supports, you can move them into the curing chamber. Now this is the same machine that you saw before for the washing. You simply just take out the bath of alcohol, put a turntable in it with a reflective finish underneath, switch it to cure, set your time, and just let it run. Now I set it to 10 minutes first, then turn the parts around so it does the other side as well, and then do it for another 10 minutes so they are fully cured. Once that is completed, I go over all the parts to see if they're nice and smooth, no imperfections to be shown, and I can move on to sanding. And sanding is something I will be doing a lot for the next couple of hours, but luckily for you, that's just a couple of minutes in this video. Now all of the supports were just taken off, and that leaves some bumps and bruises here and there. Those can usually be sanded out. Sometimes they need to be filled up, and other times it's just perfectly fine to leave them there as they are completely hidden once the build is completed, but it's all up to you how far you want to go. As far as the sanding process goes, it's pretty straightforward. I first use a pretty rough grit. I think this is about a 240/320 grit, and then later on finish it off with a 600 grit, and if the scratches are too deep, I go with a middle step of 400 in between. Now also, some of the parts might need to be test fitted before you assemble it. I do this with every single part on this build to make absolutely sure that after paint everything fits together nicely and I don't need to remove any parts or paint or just completely repaint parts in the end. So that saves me a bit of time, and it's something you should do specifically with resin printed parts, as some of them might not fit perfectly. In this case, some of the wheel parts didn't really fit well together, so a bit of hollowing out on some of the holes was needed. And in other parts for, I believe this is the sort of air filter or a cylinder housing on the side, it also needed to be sanded out or grounded out a little bit with a rotary tool before the parts would fit together perfectly fine. With the first roughing stage now out of the way, I could move on to a 600 grit to refine everything and get it ready for primer. All of the parts were primed about once or twice with some primer from Splash Paints, just their regular light gray. I could then start applying all of the various colors. This is the first stage. I will be moving on to a second or even a third stage for some parts, masking them off and painting them in different colors. The tires were painted in a flat black, some engine pieces were painted in a silver, other pieces for the suspension in a gunmetal, which then later will be masked off, and painted silver for some other parts on that same piece. And the main cowl pieces are painted in a Ferrari Verde Zeltweg, a metallic green from Ferrari, which I've used on my Ford Mustang a little while ago as well, and is a color that I really love. Now, green and tan is a really good combination in my personal opinion, and gold is also a really nice complementary color here as well. So after painting everything in the green, I decided that it was lacking a little bit and could be just further modernized or customized a little more with a gold stripe down the center. Now for the seats and the handles, I decided not to go with a saddle tan as I already had the gold stripe, but in the end that might not have even looked that bad, so maybe something to take note of for the next time. But for now, I just leave those black and go with the gold and green combination. Now with that first set of colors now completed, I could move on to some other parts that also needed a second color, a bit of masking, a bit of painting, and then moving on to the exhaust. Now the exhaust was first painted silver. That looks a bit too plain, and on motorcycles it usually has a lot of heat staining, so that is what I did here as well. Now it wasn't done perfectly, I hadn't done this in a couple of years, so my technique was a bit rusty, but I went over it with a couple coats of different clear colors, and then in the end a burnt exhaust or burnt iron color to blend it all together. And as you can see, in the meantime, I've already moved on to clear coating all of the green and gold parts with a nice glossy 2K clear from Roma SL. I've also done this to the wheels, some other parts all round, but I'm not really going to bother showing you that. It took about 2 to 3 coats for it to fully cover and get the glossiness that I liked. After applying the clear coat, I just simply set the parts aside for about 5 days, and in the meantime just moved on with some other bits and bobs around the build to let the clear fully cure and get hard before I move on to assembly. Since most of the detail painting and main colors have been applied with the airbrush in multiple different coats, there wasn't really all that much additional detailing that needed to be done with a brush, just a bit of highlighting, low lighting, and washing with some Panelline accent color and some silver accents here and there, but nothing too much. I could then start with the assembly itself, which was pretty complicated and required a bit of figuring out before, so just a dry assembly is required to make sure that all the parts fit together and also fit in the way they need to go together in a specific order. So since this is a 3D file that is available online, it's not a professional model kit, and therefore the instructions usually are the thing that is missing from the build, so there is a little bit of figuring out to do for yourself. But overall it didn't really have all that many parts, and with a couple of dry fits beforehand it can pretty easily be figured out. And luckily, if you're watching this video and then building it, you can just simply follow along with me and just do it that way, and it saves you a lot of time. All of the parts really fit together super well after all of the preparations that were done before painting and the checking and fitting, etc. But overall it wasn't really all that hard to fit together. The files were done really well and it didn't really require all that much adjustment. As for glue, I'm just simply using Bob Smith Industries Super Gold Plus. Now, like I mentioned before, I decided to go with a black seat leather and also the black handles for the accelerator and just the other handle. I could have gone with a saddle tan, and I think that would look pretty good as well, but I'm just a bit torn between the two, and the black doesn't really look all that bad either. Now let me know in the comments what you would have done or what you prefer on this specific color combination that I've gone for so far. One of the more complicated assemblies of this kit is the front wheel. Now as you can see, there is a tire missing, and I'm already assembling the brakes, the calipers, etc. And I'm doing this way because I'm stupid and the tire should have been put on before. But since this is a pretty tight fit in between the front forks, I decided to assemble it inside of the forks, so I didn't really have to press, pry, and bend the forks over the parts. But after just assembling the entire thing, I then came to the conclusion that the tire would still need to be put on, so I had to do it the other way anyway. Now my advice would be to assemble the tire and the wheel first, and then just follow my steps that I did before pulling it out again, as it is a pretty tight fit, and I didn't really like prying the forks apart to fit over the calipers and the discs, etc., as that is a super tight fit. Moving on, the front fork is now fully assembled, could simply be glued in place. That small cowl windshield kind of thing up front simply just glues on top, and some other parts for the shifter and the rear brake, or the foot pedals and the rear brake and the front foot shifter things down below would also simply just slide in place. And for the rear, simply just put the tire on, add the disc brake, slot it into the rear section, and then that's pretty much assembled. For the lower cowl, we simply just need to glue in the radiator and then slide it in place with a small amount of glue on the two tabs left and right. One final thing that I forgot to paint previously was the gauge cluster. Now I'm simply just going to go for a black paint, as this is a 3D printed kit and it doesn't come with decals. Just painting it black as the bike is turned off is pretty good in my opinion. I could have also gone with a bit of the green-yellow tone that a lot of these screens usually have, but since this is a pretty futuristic bike, I think it has a more modern display, and that simply is black when it's turned off. I hope you guys enjoyed this build as much as I did, and I know for a fact that I will be building more bikes in the future, and if you want to see that, let me know. Thank you to Creality for sending out all of the products, the printers, the resin, and also the cleaning stations. Again, links will be in the description down below, and also thank you Micromachines for creating this super awesome file. I will be sure to build some more of yours in the future. Again, links in the description. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you guys next time.